theories. There are two phases. We have consensus and conflict theories. Now, these two theories are consensus theories and conflict theories. For consensus theories, they view shared norms and values as fundamental in society. They believe that social change occurs in a slow and orderly manner, like structural functionalism. For conflict theories, they emphasize the dominance of some social groups from others. They believe that social change occurs in a rapidly and fast pace, like conflict theories.
There is conflict and consensus theories. Now, these two could not exist without the other. So why is that? Why couldn't they exist with each other? Number one, because there can be no conflict if there is no consensus. And number two, conflict can result to consensus and integration. Now, we're going to move on to the next major factor of conflict theory, which is the authority. Authority is in the position, not in the individual. Now, these positions have a certain role to play, and once you elect a person in that position, they are expected to act in that certain way. Now, what happens is that a society is divided into two major groups, which is the superordinate groups and the subordinate groups. Now, these two start having conflicts of interest because, number one, they both have different things that they want to happen. The superordinate position wants to maintain the status quo, while the subordinate positions seek change. They always seek change. So what happens is that they have conflicts of interest. Now, these conflicts, they aren't always conscious. They aren't always conscious, but they are always there. And these are called latent interest, which becomes manifest interest once they start recognizing it. Now, the last part for authority is that we have to know that it is not constant. Why is it not constant? Because a person in a superordinate position in one group can be in a subordinate position in another group. And another thing is that conflicts of interest are always latent, which makes the person in the position always at risk of losing the position itself.
Now, let's talk about groups, conflict, and change. Now, there are three types of groups: the quasi, the interest, and the conflict. Now, to explain quasi, a more macro group concerning one big group of random individuals that create interest groups. Regarding interest groups, the word interest itself pertains already to the things that we want. Like, for example, in a quasi group, there are certain individuals that like similar things, and those are the ones that create the interest group. Now, in between the interest group, there's always different views, different perceptions that would create conflict, and such conflict will lead to change. And when conflict is intense, it creates radical changes. And when conflict is violent, it creates sudden structural changes.
Antonio Francesco Gramsci was a brilliant Italian Marxist philosopher and communist politician. He was a key figure in Italian communism towards the beginning of the 20th century. He also played a vital role in the transition from economic determinism to more modern Marxian positions. Gramsci operated with a rather elitist conception in which ideas were generated by intellectuals and then extended to the masses and put in practice by them. He rejected the idea of automatic or inevitable historical development. The masses had to act in order to bring about social revolution, but to act, the masses had to become conscious of their social situation and the nature of the system in which they live in. One of the ideas Gramsci worked with is hegemony. Hegemony is essentially the idea of a dominant group using culture in order to legitimize their dominance. Cultural domination by a ruling class of a socially stratified society. It is defined by Gramsci as cultural leadership exercised by ruling class. Example of cultural hegemony. In elections, a person is presented with a political ideology that contains pleasant-sounding ideas and beliefs that he or she may agree with. Once he or she agrees with that ideology or political party, he'll make all his political decisions based on that ideology. Predominance obtained by consent. Power can be exercised and reinforced as much through cultural texts as much as physical force. Just by living their lives, the working class are consenting to being ruled by the ruling class.
Criticisms of Marxian theory. Since Marx focused on economic realm or the concept of having capitalists and proletarians as the foundation of society, the critical school emphasizes that economic determinists should not only focus on the economic realm but also to the social aspects of those people behind it. They didn't consider the economic determinists as social entities that have personal lives as well. Number 2, positivism. Since people only gain knowledge through scientific method, and since scientific methods are facts and have proofs, they just keep on accepting those information without asking questions. From the word passive, positivism tends to reify or give a certain thing its own existence. For example, money. We forgot that we people are the one who gave value to those papers, which we call money now. We all know that because of the existence of the value on that paper, we have these economic struggles but we can change it since we already established its own existence. And because of verifying things, we just accept it and do nothing about it. Positivism also makes people silent. Since people just accept those information, no one have the guts to make judgment about it. They are just contented on what's happening. Systems of sociology. Since sociology is a study of society or as a whole or as a group, the idea of sociology, the conflict was that they only accept the status quo. They already surrendered on helping people that are oppressed by the society. They just focused on the majority and ignored the individuality of the people.
Now let's discuss the critique of modern society. While the Marxian theory aimed specifically at the economic aspect of the society, the Frankfurt School shifted its orientation to the cultural level. What we mean by cultural level is focusing on the cultural repression of the individual in modern society. Weberian Marxists focus on rationality becoming the dominant social problem of society, wherein rationality is concerned with decision-making. Weber described rationality having different forms, two of which the critical school adopted, the formal rationality and the substantive rationality. Formal rationality is concerned with achieving any given purpose through the most effective means. It is viewed as technocratic thinking because problems are solved by the application of technical criteria. On the other hand, substantive rationality is what we call reason. It is assessing to solve problems which is subject to values and appeals to the ethical norms. The critical school views the modern world as filled with irrationality, despite seemingly rational. An example of this would be the event that occurred during Hitler's time, the concentration camps. It was irrational in a way that to eliminate the people against the government, they had to kill them. But it is unreasonable because how they did it was inhumane. Now let's discuss the critique of culture. Culture industry is a term used by social thinkers Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer to describe how popular culture in the capitalist society functions like an industry in producing standardized products which produces standardized people. But two things worry the critical thinkers about this. First is its falseness, thinking that it is a repackaged set of ideas that are mass-produced and distributed to the masses of the media. Next is its pacifying, repressing, and stupefying effect on people. An example of this would be YouTubers. We see these internet video bloggers producing videos for profit. Watching their life get better because of this prompts people to do the same, because it sends a consumerist message about how good lives should look. Now let's go to one of the major contributions of the Frankfurt School. Number one is subjectivity. The Hegelian roots of Marxian theory are the major source of interest in subjectivity. Critical school feels that Marxists have overemphasized economic structure and that this emphasis has served to overwhelm their interest in other aspects of social reality, especially the culture.
Critique of domination. Since the modern world reached the stage of unsurpassed domination of individuals, the control over the people is so complete that it no longer requires a leader. Since there are so many people who are capable to control other people, there are no clear vision and mission of the society. There are no goals and diversity of knowledge occurs. For example, there are different groups in a classroom. Each group has different beliefs and goals. Therefore, at the end, everyone has different end goal in mind, in such a way that no one knows what is the idea of having common goal, and it's gonna be chaotic because of the different views, objectives, beliefs, and goals. The concern about considering the social aspect of the person is that the legitimation. Since in this era, culture will be the basis of the society. So the problem was that how would the person know if it's legitimate or if it's right? So the need of proof and supporting ideas comes next. What if these practices are wrong? So these ideas need support from other existing ideas. Critical school was concerned about the actors and their consciousness as an individual, since further consciousness can be controlled by external forces, which is culture, and which may be also the society itself. Next, it fails to develop revolutionary consciousness. And lastly, critical theorists fail to differentiate individual consciousness and culture and links between them.
Okay, for dialectics, the first one, it is a dialectical approach, and it is a rejection of a focus on any specific aspect of social life, which is especially the economic system. It is also a methodological prescription. Okay, the next topic that we're going to talk about is authentication, which is defined by the ultimate test of ideas is to the degree that they are used in practice. So, critical theory. Critical theory is said to combine both theory and practice, and it is said to be elitist. So, it also addresses several esoteric topics only, which means it doesn't talk about the day-to-day problems within our daily lives. So, next, knowledge and human interest. Jurgen Habermas has an interest between the relationship of knowledge and human interest. It is where it is concerned with the relationship between subjective and objective factors, where subjective is defined as where human interest exists, and objective is where knowledge exists. Here we're going to talk about the ideas of Jurgen Habermas. So, the first one is the differences with Marx. It is to develop a theoretical program or a reconstruction of historical materialism, and it is also argued that Marx failed to distinguish the fundamental distinction. So, there are three types of action that is mainly being discussed. So the first one is purposive rational action or work. Basically, it is a between instrumental action and strategic action to achieve communicative understanding. The second one is instrumental action, which is the actor is rationally calculating a given goal. And the third one is strategic action, where it involves two or more individuals coordinating purposive rational action in the pursuit of a goal. So, the other one that is the most important one out of all of the actions is communicative action, which is basically interaction, and it is the most distinctive and most common and the foundation of all social cultural life. So, the next one that we're going to discuss is rationalization. Rationalization, which means rationality, that is the removal of barriers that distort communication. It is focused on the realization of purposive rational action, and the real problem lies behind the rationalization of communicative action. And also the next one, which is communication, which is consensus that arises theoretically in discourse and communicative action. It is force or power that does not determine which arguments win. Instead, the better argument emerges victoriously.